everyone, I'm Georgia and this is The Sound of Georgia. I'm sorry there wasn't a video last week. I filmed and everything and something went wrong when I tried to upload it all into the computer. The files got corrupted or something. Anyway, we're back today. We have a lot of Today in Julie Andrews history videos coming this year, and honestly most of them are for things that I don't really care for. But today's one is one that I very much do love. It's Lutely. This week it's the 65th anniversary of My Fair Lady. Do I even need to give an introduction for this one? This was Julie's second musical theatre role and undoubtedly her biggest. And not just for her, but as a show overall. It was, as a musical, undoubtedly the most successful of any of the theatre musicals she ever did. The show premiered at the Mark Hellinger Theatre, Hellinger, I don't know, on the 15th of March 1956. So 65 years ago as of Monday. Music and lyrics were written by Lerner and Loewe, and it is their song and a couple of scenes away from being a direct rip-off of George Bernard Shaw's Pygmalion. Seriously, it's so similar, it's kind of ridiculous. Made a whole video. Actually, this wasn't the first time somebody had tried to turn Pygmalion into a musical. Rodgers and Hammerstein gave it a try, and clearly that wasn't a success. And even before Lerner and Loewe got it finished, they ended up putting it on the back burner for a couple of years. The story is set in 1912 in London and tells the story of the cocky phonetics professor named Henry Higgins, who tries to turn the Cockney flower girl, Eliza Doolittle, into a lady by teaching her to speak properly, because he believes language and speech are the real class barriers in society. And of course, being the type of character he is, it's really all for his own personal gain. Or at least his own personal satisfaction. Julie had finished up wrapping up her role in The Boyfriend in 1955, and despite the reason she only took a 1-year contract for that show, rather than a 2-year contract for that show, she was still in America. And it was after the creative team of My Fair Lady saw her in that show that things started to happen. Now, you may have heard the story about how around the same time Julie was auditioning for Richard Rodgers for Pipe Dream, and after she'd finished, he came up to her and asked her if she'd been auditioning for anything else. She told him she had.
And he looked at me for a very long time, and then he said, "Oh," he said, "I tell you what, if they ask you to do that show, I think you should. But if you don't do that show, I wish you would let us know, because we would very much like to use you."
Thank goodness she did, because Pipe Dream was a complete flop, and My Fair Lady, when it came out, was the most successful musical at the time. The cast included Rex Harrison as Higgins, Robert Coote as Colonel Pickering, Stanley Holloway as Alfred P. Doolittle, and the three of them, along with Julie, came back and reprised their roles when the show went to London a couple years later. And also in the cast was Catherine Nesbitt as Mrs. Higgins, the best character in the entire show, and John Michael King as Freddie Eynsford Hill, the most boring character in all of musical theatre history. At least out of any that I know. Team Eliza and Higgins all the way. Yeah, I know Higgins is incredibly problematic and treats Eliza very poorly a lot of the time, but at least he's interesting. Lars Hart with the director, Cecil Beaton did the costumes and was kind of the de facto photographer, and apparently the inspiration for that really annoying photographer in that scene in Victor Victoria. And Franz Olives did the conducting, and both Franz and Moss will come back to Julie and Lerner and Loewe to do Camelot a few years later. Rex Harrison was kind of infamously a pain in the ass to work with, in a lot of his things actually. But when it came to My Fair Lady, apparently he wouldn't look at Julie while he sang I've Grown Accustomed to Her Face. And there was one point where he said, well, I can't even actually say it because cursing. But he said, if that is here on Monday, then I'm quitting the show. I'm sure you can guess what the word I didn't say is. As for the whole Audrey-Julie debacle, I'm not going to get into it in this video because it's a story unto itself. It made sense why Jack Warner didn't pick Julie for the role for the movie, and hey, she got her little sweet revenge at the Golden Globes.
Finally, my thanks to a man who made a wonderful movie and who made all this possible in the first place, Mr. Jack Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Warner, for not picking me. I won a Golden Globe. And the thing that makes that so wonderful is she was totally genuine. Even if she didn't do the movie, she loves it. And I love it. I love this show so much. Obviously outside of the two little performances that Julie recorded for the Ed Sullivan Show, I haven't seen anything with her because she wasn't able to commit it to film. other than those two little performances. But unlike Camelot, which I talked about last year, with My Fair Lady I've got more than the album and a movie I would rather forget about to go off. Not that the movie's bad. I liked it well enough when I first saw it, before I knew Julie had any connection to it at all. I actually remember thinking it was kind of like Princess Diaries. This was before I hated Princess Diaries. But discovering Julie's connection to it only skyrocketed it to the top of the musicals I loved list. And then after I got to see it, it got even bigger. It's been almost 5 years, and it feels like it was only yesterday when I saw it back in 2016 when it came down here with Julie directing for the 60th anniversary. Obviously Julie wasn't in it, at least not on stage, but I was able to see something that wasn't the version with Audrey. Even though Julie comes up every time you talk about Audrey doing My Fair Lady, by doing the film, Audrey had become the definitive version. Meaning something to film really makes it definitive in a way that just doing it on stage doesn't. That's not just with My Fair Lady, it's with everything. But because this wasn't the movie, and therefore the definitive version, it was okay that it wasn't Julie. And Anna Roburn did a beautiful job.
All I want is a room somewhere far away from the cold night air, with one enormous chair. Now wouldn't it be lovely?
And I know that even if Julie wasn't a part of it, at least not on the stage, the fact that she was originally in My Fair Lady is a huge part of the reason I love it as much as I do. I'd probably rank it number 2 out of all the musicals I've seen at the theatre, right behind Wicked, title that it gets to hold on to for 5 more days. I'm sorry, but I already know that Hamilton's going to bump Wicked down to number 2 and My Fair Lady down to number 3 after I see it on Sunday. I'm so excited! But let's get back to the other musical with an Eliza and a Just You Wait that we're talking about today. A month after the show opened, the cast recording was released, and it went on to be the most successful album of that year. The show got 10 Tony nominations and won 6. Julie was one of the nominations, but I'm pretty sure you know she didn't win. Rex won for Best Actor, Moss won for Best Directing, Cecil Beaton won for Best Costumes, Oliver Smith won for Best Scenic Design, and Franz Eller won for Best Conducting. And the show overall won Best Musical. And at that time, it was the biggest musical. And despite how flawed and downright sexist it is, Julie even outright admitted when she was directing down here that young women especially will and should find it hard. But despite all that, it still holds up. The story is rather unique for a musical, at least as a concept, which was probably why it was such a big undertaking to turn it into a show. The songs are wonderful. It is a beautiful production to see. I saw it 3 times, and a long time ago my local theatre group performed it, so I saw it then. I don't think it has to be any specific company to be wonderful. Julie was trying to make it as close to the original 1956 production as she could when it came down here. And yet we still got the altered lyrics that they changed when the show went to London. Because we always do. We got it when Legally Blonde came down, and I guarantee that will be the case with Hamilton. Despite all of that, My Fair Lady holds up. It's lovely. And that's everything I've got for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you've seen My Fair Lady at the theatre. And even if you haven't, what's your favourite song? Mine has to be Show Me. But I made a whole video ranking them last year. Feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my video next week. So long for a while.